What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video, please make sure you hit that like button and let me know what you think of today's very interesting discussion in the comment section below. If you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet, or living under a rock and seeing this video for the first time, I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that subscribe button below now so you never miss another Sit Down video. If you're listening to us currently on iTunes or Spotify, welcome in. Please leave us a detailed review and a 5-star rating. What's up, everybody? Welcome into episode 234 of the show. I am your host, Jeff Nadu. We are powered, as always, by Profit X. If you're looking for a great spot to wager on football, basketball, baseball, whatever your heart desires, look no further than Profit X. Some of the best odds in the business right now in the first sports prediction exchange in the country. You can wager on everything. And what's great about it is, if you're in states like California and Florida or Texas that maybe have limited or no betting opportunities, ProfitX is available for you right now. Why is that? Well, ProfitX is an app and it's a sports prediction exchange that allow you to wager on odds set by yourself, or you can match ones set by others. So they're going to allow you to get the best price on wagering. This is the new and improved way to wager in America. Make sure you get that sleek app. You click the link in the pinned comment. Sign up by using my promo code JeffNadu, promo code JeffNadu. Sign yourself up now and get wagering today. Let's get into the episode today, ladies and gentlemen. And I have to say, right out of the gate, I'm incredibly proud of the episode I'm about to give you. I've spent a ton of time over the last couple of days on this show. It is a complex grouping of indictments that I think for me, what I tried to first understand is, and I hope that people see the amount of salacious nonsense that this case has produced. What I've always tried to tell people is, when you have a criminal indictment, the most important thing you can do is read the indictment. There is so much nonsense being thrown out there. I admit, I understand. There's a lot of clickbait headlines in this case, from the NBA to the mob to poker and sports betting. But what I don't think a lot of people are actually doing is just reading the indictment. And I get there's a lot of intricacies with this. What I learned about it is, I think I was able to use a lot of the sports betting and poker acumen that I have. I believe in this episode, some of the best sourcing that you can find. I learned all sorts of things about some of the people here. And what I noticed in both indictments here, which I'm going to go over, is there's a series of individuals, none of whom are in the mafia, that have used their manipulative tactics and, let's just be honest, cheating and scheming ways to put the right people together that allowed them to make a ton of money, both through sports betting and poker. So let's, without further ado, delve in to this wild case involving, in certain ways, the mob, NBA Hall of Famers, current players, sports betting touts, poker organizers and players, cheating, all sorts of stuff. What we'll first do, and this must be made clear, there is two separate indictments out of the Eastern District of New York involving this. The first case I'm going to surround ourselves with is a case alleging manipulation through information gained by players and coaches into prop bets that sports betting handicappers used to make money. I want this to be made abundantly clear. Through both this indictment, there is no involvement of the mafia in this. In fact, in this indictment, there is no mention of the word mafia, La Cosa Nostra, anything. This scheme was perpetrated by mostly sports betting handicappers with influence, and they used their connections to athletes to perpetrate their ability to make money. I also want it to be made clear that in both indictments, whether it be Terry Rozier or Chauncey Billups or whoever, There is no mention whatsoever that any of those defendants that either played, have played, currently play, or coach in the NBA had any involvement or communication with any member of the mafia. And don't let any media, podcast, newspaper, blog tell you differently. All you have to do is read this indictment, and that will make that clear. You have to realize when you have a federal indictment, for the most part, there are all sorts of names. Some of the people know each other, some of the people don't. That's important to understand. Let's delve in first to the indictment surrounding the prop betting, sports handicapping world. This straight up was perpetrated by mostly sports betting handicappers. What is a sports betting handicapper? Well, it's a person who uses the internet to sell prognostications, their predictions, breakdowns, things of that nature to customers who would then use that information to wager on sports betting. It's been going on for years. Let's talk about some of the main people in this case, because this is a lot smaller as far as an indictment than the other one. The first person that I think needs to be discussed is obviously the big name on this, and that's Terry Rozier, current NBA player, last played for the Miami Heat. In fact, he was sitting on the bench the other night when the Heat started their season. He is obviously the big name here. We also will find several fairly used names in this. Number one, a person called Marvis Vizino Fairley. Vizino is his nickname. Mr. Fairley is a sports betting handicapper and bettor. We also will see this person, his name pop up a lot. His name is Shane Hennon. Now, Shane Hennon is from Western Pennsylvania. He is also a sports betting handicapper and bettor himself. We also will see Mr. Hennon's name in the other indictment. He also is very involved in the poker scene. He acts as a dealer for another defendant in another case we're going to talk about. There is some overlapping between him in this case and the other case. We also will see this guy's name. His name is De Niro Laster. We also will hear one other name, and this guy is in both schemes. His name is Eric Ernest. Now, what I learned about Mr. Ernest, one thing you have to know about the sports betting and poker communities, a lot of them overlap. I bet on sports. I also play poker. A lot of these people all know each other, and it's kind of a rolling group that you see them in games, they bet. Like it's all kind of cyclical and it's all kind of uniformed. So let's first get into the scheme with Terry Rozier, right? Which involves a game in particular where Mr. Rozier, and it's detailed here, during the 2022-23 season, where the defendant Terry Rozier played for the Charlotte Hornets. Now, prior to that game against the New Orleans Pelicans, Mr. Rozier informed the defendant in this case, De Niro Laster, that he was going to prematurely remove himself from the game in the first quarter due to an injury, and he wouldn't play any further. Now, this would allow the defendants to get money down and, get an advantage. The question is, and this is one I'll first answer, how does Laster and Rozier, how do they know each other? Well, they've known each other for years. They're around the same age, and both of them are from the Cleveland, Ohio area. One of them went to Cleveland Heights High School. The other went to Shaker Heights High School. Now, Rozier obviously went on to play for the University of Louisville in college. He would then be drafted and go to the NBA, and he would continue to maintain contact with Mr. Laster, who would ultimately play college football at schools like the University of Kentucky, which is obviously not far from Louisville University. So there's the involvement with those two. Now, what we would also find out is that Mr. Laster had a relationship to Mr. Fairley, a.k.a. Vizino, who I will name. Now, notice we see Laster's name pop up here. Defendant Laster sold the information about Mr. Rogier and his plans to exit that game to multiple co-conspirators, including the defendant, Marvis Vizino Fairley. He would then go to legalized sports betting locations, different sports books, and bet as much money as he was able to get down on those props. Rogier would end up playing about 8 minutes in the game and then go out. So what these guys would do is they'd bet on the prop bets. So for particular, like a rebound or points, I know it's listed in particular, but they would bet on props. You go out of the game, you obviously aren't able to achieve the prop, thus meaning Mr. Fairley and others who were betting at legal sports books were able to cash in on this. Now, what would he also find out about Mr. Fairley is he was a pretty close confidant to the other defendant in this case, Shane Hennon. Now, I want it to be made clear about who exactly Shane Hennon is. Shane Hennon is a confidential and also known informant. Mr. Hennon testified in a case out of Western Pennsylvania in the late 2000s against an individual named Franco Bedini. Now, in that case, which that's not the case, that's the wrong screenshot, but in that case, Mr. Hennon, which is right here, you can see in paperwork, Bedini would argue his conviction in a court case in which government witness Shane Hennon testified that he bought and sold drugs with Franco Bedini in transactions unrelated to the conspiracy. So again, understand, Shane Hennon is a rat. And what we know about rats is you don't just rat once. I think it's absolutely clear this is the source of where all these cases come from. This individual right here is a rat. It is common knowledge. You can look the paperwork up. I would venture to believe he is the source here in both of these cases. And to get out from underneath and or the fact that he was paid, he went to the government and said, I got all sorts of shit for you. Now, why these people did business with this person, I don't know. That said, money talks. And if you don't do your research on people you are around, you can get into bad predicaments. That's why I'd urge you, if you're going to do business with people, it is important you know who they are, especially if you're going to do illegal business with them. This could have all been avoided if you didn't do business with people like this. So we've understood Rogier, how he's connected to some of these big bettors. And most notably, it's his old pal, De Niro Laster. And what we'd also see in this indictment is this. A March 24th, 2023 Portland Trailblazers game, where prior to the game, the Trailblazers record was 32-40, and the team was out of playoff contention with only 10 games remaining. Prior to that game, someone identified as co-conspirator 8, which we would find out is Chauncey Billups. He tells the defendant, a person called Eric Ernest, that the Trailblazers were going to be, quote, tanking, which would ensure and increase their odds of getting a better draft pick in the upcoming 2024 NBA draft. Now, co-conspirator 8, Billups, would tell Ernest before the news was publicly announced that several players of his team, remember, he's the head coach, and that their best player, including a player 1, an individual whose identity is known to the grand jury, would not be playing in that game. The information that the Trailblazers will be tanking and player 1 was not available to the public included the betting companies. So prior to that game, defendant Eric Ernest would then provide that non-public information to our favorite guy, Marvis Fairley, who would in turn place wagers on that game. Now, in exchange, Fairley ultimately promised to pay Mr. Ernest $5,000 if the bets won, which they did, and Ernest would make money. The question is, who is Eric Ernest, and how does he connect to Chauncey Billups? Well, I talked to two sources, and they both told me the same thing. Eric Ernest, by them, they both kind of described him as a hustler. He plays in card games. He plays in poker games. He plays in wagers on sports. He's from St. Louis. And he would be described by one source as very close and boys with Chauncey Billups. So that's what connects Billups and Eric Ernest. Now remember, this is also where Eric Ernest comes to play, because in the other indictment we're going to talk about, that's how Chauncey Billups shows up at one of these poker games included in this indictment, which was held on the West Coast. Hold that thought. We'll talk about that. And notice, I've talked to people that play poker. Billups can be seen on the left playing, and I believe what this is some sort of celebrity game. The same source that described Ernest and Billups' relationship would tell me that for years they have known Billups, and his winning in poker was almost too quick. Like, he didn't even know how to play poker for a period of time, and then all of a sudden he knows how to play. I also want to get to another person in this indictment, a person called Damon Jones, who for years played in the NBA. He was a great shooter for teams like the Miami Heat. Damon Jones is now a coach for the LA Lakers, and we would find that his name also pops up here. Now, in between February of 23 and on January 15th, 2024, defendant Damon Jones, who his career is described there, was a prominent coach for the LA Lakers. During many of those years, he was obviously a coach of a prominent NBA player who's listed as player 3. Now, we would find out that player 3 is NBA great LeBron James. Now, by virtue of his relationship with player 3, the Lakers and other NBA personnel, the defendant Damon Jones had access to, like Billups, non-public information, including medical information that had not been released to the public. On multiple occasions during both the 2022-23 and 23-24 NBA seasons, including as early as approximately December 2022, Jones sold or attempted to sell for profit non-public information to others, including the defendants Eric Ernest and Marvis Fairley. So they were getting non-public information for their ability to then go place fraudulent wagers based on the non-public information. Now, on the early morning of February 9th of that game, defendant Damon Jones sent a text message to another co-conspirator 9, writing, "Get a big bet on Milwaukee tonight before the information is out. LeBron is out tonight. Bet enough so D Jones can eat too now!" Exclamation point. At the time, Jones provided this non-public information about player 3 to co-conspirator 9. He would also then, in other parts of this indictment, give information, as I said, to Ernest and Marvis Fairley, who down the road placed wagers at legal sports books and cashed out. And we're not talking a few $1,000s. These guys are betting large amounts, hundreds of thousands of dollars on all of this information. So again, throw in, you look at some of this other stuff involving Damon Jones. We would also find out that there was also another player number 4, an individual whose identity is known to the grand jury. We would find out that player 4 is LA Laker at the time, Anthony Davis. Prior to the January 15th game, defendant Damon Jones claimed to have learned from a trainer for players 3 and 4, LeBron James and Anthony Davis, that they were both injured And either were going to play a limited number of minutes and his performance would likely be affected in terms of Davis. Jones shared this non-public information with defendant Eric Ernest, who then sent a text message to defendant Marvis Fairley stating, quote, "Hit me up ASAP. Got one for you, dude. Say he got info." Ernest then shared that non-public information about Anthony Davis with Marvis Fairley. Fairley then paid paid Damon Jones approximately $2,500 through an intermediary via a peer-to-peer mobile platform, which we would find out as Zelle, accompanied by the message fee. So again, Damon Jones charging for information and getting paid for it. So notice what we see in this indictment. A group of people who are sports betting touts and handicappers and bettors themselves that have the ability to wager large amounts of money. And what they did is used intermediaries, aka friends of theirs, who had prominent coaches and players that they knew through friendships, and that's how they made money. Remember, there's no forcing anyone to do anything. There's no extortion. There's no any of that. This was done because these people, like Chauncey Billups and Terry Rozier, they were giving information to people that were friends of theirs, most notably Eric Ernest and De Niro Laster, who then had a common conduit in Mr. Fairley, who is known as a bettor. That's it. There's no forcing people to, do this and do that. The question is, why did Billups and Rozier do this? Why did Damon Jones do this? Well, in terms of, I think I don't think it's any bigger than they were sharing information with friends of theirs and trying to make some money, and they didn't think anyone would find out. I will say, when we talk about the other indictment here in a second, this is a little bit more questionable, but I think it's abundantly clear also why they may have done some of this stuff. I think it's common knowledge when you look across some of these people's backgrounds. From according to multiple sources that I have in the poker community, Damon Jones has played poker for years. Chauncey Billups has played poker for years. They like to gamble. It's entirely possible that they were in debt. We saw in the Jontay Porter case that Jontay Porter had a gambling problem. And in one of the defendants in the poker case, the poker guy just kind of said to him, "Hey, do this for me and you'll get out of this stuff." But there is a known conduit connection between all these sports betting people. They all know each other through either intermediaries or whatever. Let's now get into the other case because this is far more complex. There's way far more defendants. Now, before we do that, of this first indictment, the big questions are, what kind of charges are these people facing? Well, they're facing wire fraud. I mean, that's obviously one of them. We also know that they're going to be involved, some of them, in money laundering charges. Obviously, some of the people that they're going to have the biggest problems with this are obviously Marvis Fairley, because he's one of the main conduits with this. But when you look at Chauncey Billups, if he is obviously indeed co-conspirator 8, this is very problematic for him. I mean, all of the players and coaches in these indictments will never coach or play again in the NBA. It's that simple. And like Jontay Porter, they will be banned for life. That's that simple. Now, again, these are allegations, but if they indeed ultimately plea and or are found guilty, they will never play in this league again. It's that simple. For the people and the bettors, people like Hennon and Fairley and people like Eric Ernest, they're going to go to prison over this. Now, in terms of Hennon, I don't think he'll ever see prison because he's a rat. I think it's abundantly clear that. He's already been a rat. There's paperwork on it, which I posted. Let's now transfer and get into the other indictment. And this is, again, a far longer and bigger indictment. But then notice some of the names we just talked about are also in this, including Chauncey Billups, Shane Hennon, and Eric Ernest. I would say that when we look at Eric Ernest, to me, there's two people in both these indictments that I think are the most important. And I would say that Eric Ernest is as well, because Eric Ernest used his involvement in both the sports betting and poker industries to connect Chauncey Billups to bad people, and scam artists. And in the end, Chauncey Billups' relationship with Eric Ernest is going to cost him his career and partially his legacy if what these indictments alleging are true. So we've again proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Billups and Eric Ernest know each other. As I said, it's pretty common knowledge that Eric Ernest and Billups are friends, and they have been friends for a while. Now, I also mentioned Mr. Hennon. I mentioned his, past as a government informant. What we would also learn about Mr. Hennon is not only is he involved with the sports betting world and the selling picks world, but he's also involved in playing poker, and he's also involved as a dealer in these underground poker games. So before I get into the actual indictment, like I did with the first one, I'm going to get into this second indictment, some of the key players here. I'm also going to explain to you what exactly these underground poker games look like, how they're illegal in the first place, and then we'll get into the actual overt acts, the cheating, some of the violence in this case, understanding this federal indictment. And this is just really kind of basic information. When you get hit with a federal indictment, you're going to see a bunch of charges. Not all the charges apply to every person. So, for instance, when I discuss extortion or robberies, those aren't charges that like a Chauncey Billups is going to face. From what I found in this second indictment, Chauncey Billups only played in one game here, as far as from what I can see and what the indictment tells us. As I said at the beginning, there is no known connection here to Chauncey Billups ever speaking to a mobster, ever meeting a mobster, ever playing in any of the games that mobsters were involved in. None of that. This chiefly involves underground poker games, games that are taking a rake that are illegal. Okay, so they're not in a casino, they're in some sort of nice high rise or hotel room. And in these games, they're actually quite luxurious. There's dealers, there's massagers, beautiful women that are sometimes topless, drinks, liquor, whatever you want to eat, games on the TV. One card player that played in the New York games told me that if you want to take a loan out, there are people there that will give you one. There's all sorts of kind of perks in going to these games. Throw in the fact that when you play in an underground poker game, anything you make is not taxed. It is cash. So it's unreported income. No, that's bad for both the organizers of the game and the players themselves, because if they were to be audited, that would be money that they can't account for. Now, again, the rake is what makes these things illegal. You play with your friends on a Saturday night, nobody's taking a rake. You're just playing amongst yourselves. That's what makes these games in New York or Vegas or LA illegal. Now, I also want to discuss kind of the circuit that these poker games exist with. These games, I was told by one person, he kind of described it as a rolling kind of traveling circus, if you will. You go to different towns and you set up shop. And what we would find in this indictment is there's a series of organizers and players, and all these people kind of help each other to get players and to get high ranking celebrities or athletes, and they all kind of play in these games, and they're all used as kind of conduits to help each other out. So that's why you see a lot of these same names in this indictment. Someone like Eric Ernest is helpful because not only does he play in these games, but he brings people like Chauncey Billups or maybe another athlete, and that athlete brings another athlete. And it's all kind of word of mouth. It's not like these are broadcasted, out there. These are more underground. That's kind of the theme of them. Now, obviously, these involve cheating, and we'll get to that. But I did want to just give a background. And what we would find in this indictment is inside the games, there are two separate circuits, one of which involves the West Coast, LA, Las Vegas. And there was also a game in Miami that kind of had some interplay between some of the West Coast people and the East Coast people. This is what I'm about to tell you, the most important thing in this indictment. In LA, in Las Vegas, in Miami even, there is no influence of the mafia in those cities. Those cities are defunct. They don't have any Italian mafia in them. There's no oversight by the mafia. What brings the mafia into this indictment is the fact that there were 2 games referenced in this indictment that were based in New York City. If you know anything about New York City, the mafia in certain neighborhoods have had sway over poker games and strip clubs and some seedy businesses that are off the radar of law enforcement. And I'll explain how and why they do that. So it's first important to understand when you hear names like Chauncey Billups or Damon Jones, there's no known connection in this case with the mafia. Billups played in 1 game in April of 2019, which I'll talk about, where he took part in cheating, yes, but there was no connection to the mafia in that game. And anybody that plays out in Vegas or places like that, they'll tell you there's no wise guys in those areas that are involved with this kind of stuff. So let's get into the indictment itself. I just kind of wanted to go over some of the people, and I will continue doing that. The most important person in this indictment to me, and the name that pops up time and time again, is the individual circled here. It's the only known photo I was able to find of this individual. His name is Amar Awadi. And what I would find out is Awadi's connection is pretty interesting because he has connections not only to the poker world, but the sports betting world. One of his closest friends is Shane Hennon. Someone would tell me that Awadi, his personal dealer and the guy he's regularly trying to get as a dealer in these games is Shane Hennon. Because again, Shane Hennon moonlights as a poker dealer. And what's interesting about Mr. Awadi is his name actually popped up a year or so ago in the case involving NBA player Jontay Porter, who eventually pled guilty in his own prop scheme. Now, what we would find out about Mr. Awadi is kind of interesting because we would find out that guess what? He is from Brooklyn, New York. He's actually his family are involved in owning a bodega in Brooklyn. And in that Jontay Porter indictment, according to the Washington Post, Awadi began trying to persuade Jontay Porter to clear his gambling debts by performing a, quote, special withdrawing from certain games prematurely to ensure that under prop bets on Porter's performance were successful, similar to the way Terry Rozier did. Now, what the Washington Post would find is that Awadi and his family run a bodega in Brooklyn. In April of 2017, criminal charges in a civil lawsuit accused Awadi and several associates of stealing approximately $1.5 million from the victim of a train accident who made a deal with the shop owners to store some of her settlement funds with them. Awadi then used his split of the money to, quote, pay for gambling trips and wedding expenses, including a bachelor party in Las Vegas and honeymooning in the Turks and Caicos, prosecutors alleged. Now, according to one source I talked to that knows Awadi, would tell me that right now in America, there is no bigger poker cheat than Amar Awadi right now. And I think when we look into the cheating aspect of this, he and his co-conspirators, they were the real scumbags in this case. And I know when you hear the word mob, you think, how are they not the scumbags? Well, I'll explain. The mob was just kind of running games like they normally do. And there was some interplay between them, but Awadi is a name you hear a lot in this. Now, a lot of people, when they hear also underground poker, they think of what they know, things like Molly's Game. I think the difference between this case and things like Molly's Game is, yes, Molly's Game was taking an illegal rake, but there was no cheating that we know of involved in that. So let's kind of get into more about who runs these games. And we'll first talk about New York, and then we'll get into some of the overt acts in Miami and Las Vegas. Remember, the only places, as far as games, the mob had influence in was in New York. There were 2 different games, one of which was in Midtown Manhattan. The other was in Greenwich Village. Now, notice this first sentence. With respect to poker games held in New York City. Members and associates of the Bonanno, Gambino, and Genovese crime families used threats and intimidation to assure payments of debts from the rigged poker games and the square illegal games organized by defendants Awadi, Zenyu, Robert Stroud, and Seth Trussman. That first kind of part of that is important. With respect to the games in New York, there's no mob involvement in Miami or out in Las Vegas. So anybody that's trying to connect Chauncey Billups to the mafia, all it is headline clickbait. I can guarantee with absolute certainty. Now, whether or not you respect me as a mob podcaster, I know a lot about organized crime. I have all sorts of sources. I can almost guarantee Mr. Billups has never met a mobster or communicated with a mobster, and I believe that under oath he would state that. So let's talk about the first game. First game was held 147 Lexington Avenue in Midtown Manhattan. Now, in that game, notice, on or about January 2022 to October 2023, the game at 147 Lex Avenue, defendants Ernest Aiello, Saul Becker, Thomas Gilardo, Tony Goodson, Kenny Hahn, Osman Hotai, as well as Zenyu, Seth Trussman, and Julius Ziliani, known as Jay, together with others, managed Lexington Avenue. Now, what we would find is the people that ran the game on a weekly basis were mobsters from the Bonanno crime family, most notably a made guy, Julius Ziliani, and a man, an associate, Thomas Gilardo. Now, for anyone that is not familiar, anybody that's kind of new to understanding what the mob means, there's a difference between a mob associate and a mobster. A mobster is a made guy, a person who has gotten their button and become initiated into the family. An associate is just someone who maybe provides money and or the ability to be an enforcer. They don't have their button. So that's the difference between Gilardo and Ziliani. We would also learn that in unison, some of the game organizers, Trussman, Zhen Yu, all those guys, they were also there at the games, and they were kind of the conduits to getting players and doing all that sort of thing. The mob, the Bonanno family, had interest, a money interest in the game. So when the game ends at night, let's say they make 30 grand, that money is dispersed. The Bonanno family get a piece. For years, this has been like this, okay? This goes back to the 60s and 70s, where if you were doing a dice game, a card game, you were a bookmaker, you ran a strip club, you were paying what we would call a tax to the mafia. So what happens is these legit game organizers, they start these games in these swanky areas. The mob finds out about it. They go to these people and say, look, you're in our area. You got to pay us a percentage, a juice, a vig. They do it. That money, it's gained from the game, that goes to the made guy, in this case, Ziliani. He then kicks up that money to what we would call his skipper or capo regime. That captain was a person called Ernest Aiello. Now, it's likely that Ernie Aiello never went to this game or even knew where the game was. Every week and or month, a person who's in the mafia has to kick up a percentage of his money to his captain. Now, Ernie Aiello is, for years, been a guy that has been on the upper echelon of this family. His cousin is the boss of this family, a person called Michael Mancuso. He has not been named in this. So that's your Lexington Avenue game. And we'll get into the overt acts, but I just want to go through both locations. The other location was 80 Washington Place, which is in Greenwich Village. One of the main organizers in that game was Amar Awadi. So, his name obviously pops up. And, the Greenwich Village game, we would find out, had kind of a grouping of people. Both members and associates of the Genovese and Gambino crime families had a piece in that game. So whatever was made, let's say 50,000 was made in the game. Gambinos get their cut. Genovese get their cut. Game organizers get their cut. Now, the people that were involved in that game from the Gambino crime family include an associate, John Gallo, a captain, Lee Fama, as well as another captain, Joseph Lani, as well as mob soldier, Angelo Jr. Ruggiero. Now, also, the Genovese family had their hand in it. The proceeds for them were collected on behalf of a person called Matthew Didino. Now, we have reported on this channel, and other mob news sites have reported this as well, that Didino has become a made guy over the last couple of years. So those two families get a proceed of this game. Now, you can look up 80 Washington Place for yourself. It is a beautiful townhome in New York City. It is a great place to play poker. Now, what's interesting about Awadi is he confirmed the fact that the game that he ran at 80 Washington Place was backed by the Mafia in this text message. He's asked by another defendant, quote, "So what family you with now? Gambling? Colombo or Genovese? Laughed my fucking ass off." He would respond, and his nickname is Flappy, quote, "Gambino, sir." So he confirms that. And we know that Awadi is from Brooklyn. It is entirely possible that through his running games, because when you run poker games, pretty much everybody knows who you are. It's possible that members knew him in maybe some sort of random way, and members of the Gambino crime family went to him and said, "Look, you're with us now." We know that Lee Fama also, this is Lee. Lee's brother, Danny Fama, is a heavyweight in the Gambino family. Lee also for years has been a prominent poker player. He's played in tournaments. He's played in the cash game circuit. Here he can be seen playing, I believe, at Parks, which is in Pennsylvania. Then we also know that Angie Ruggiero Jr. as well as Joe Lonnie also took an envelope from this. And Lonnie acted as likely the captain here. Now, Fama may have kicked up to somebody else, but everybody got their hands in this. So let's talk about the overt acts here, right? Because now we've gotten into what these games are, where they are, who runs them. Now, remember, I didn't get into the particular games out in Vegas and Miami, but I will talk about them during the overt act part of this. Now, when we get into the cheating itself, at these rigged games, the members of the cheating teams, according to the indictment, including the defendants and their co-conspirators, use card shuffling machines that were purportedly randomly shuffling the players' cards to ensure fairness, which is very normal. Every casino in the world has a card shuffler. However, these groups had rigged shuffling machines, which were secretly altered to use concealed technology to read the cards in the deck, predict which player at the table had the best poker hand, and then relay that information via interstate wires to an off-site operator. The operator then communicated that information by cellular telephone to a member of the cheating team seated at the rigged poker tables, referred to as the quarterback or driver, who then used secret signaling to share the information with the other members of the cheating teams playing in these games. Now, the cheating teams used the information from the quarterback to defraud particular victims who believed they were playing in straight illegal poker games. At times, the defendants also utilized other technologies, such as electronic poker chip trays that could secretly read cards placed on the table, card analyzers that utilized technology loaded into decoy cell phones that could surreptitiously detect which cards were on the table, and playing cards that had markers visible only to individuals wearing specially designed contact lenses or glasses. So again, very good technology. However, I do want to make clear, from what I understand, this cheating stuff, I've talked to a lot of mob guys in my life, both on the record and off the record. I've interviewed them here on the channel. When these games all started, I would venture to believe that most mobsters have no problem with just a normal straight game. All this is going to do is bring unwanted attention, which it absolutely does. This went from being a real simple pinch to now you're dealing with cheating. Do I think every mobster in this indictment knew this was going on? No, I don't. Especially the captains. I don't think they would even know. And if they did, people just want paid in the end. I'm not going to try to sell to you that the mob aren't bad people, because they are. But I believe the cheating was introduced by known poker scammers like Mr. Awadi. So now that we kind of understand some of the methods of how these people were cheating, let's first talk about a game in Nevada. It was held in Las Vegas, which we know that in this indictment, this is the only known game that Chauncey Billups played in. Now, notice something. Now, this goes back to our first indictment. Notice the defendants, Chauncey Billups, Eric Ernest, Jamie Gillette, Robert Stroud, and Sophia Wee organized and participated in these rigged games using a rigged shuffling machine from defendant Stroud. Again, we see Mr. Billups' connection to Eric Ernest. Ernest is the conduit here. He's a poker player and sports bettor. That's how Billups is connected here. He's not connected because some mob guy called him and said, "Hey, Chauncey, why don't you come play today?" Didn't work like that. There was one game Mr. Billups played in, and what is really concerning for Billups is the fact that he was involved with the cheating is obviously very problematic. It's not illegal to play in a poker game, and there are hundreds of celebrities that play in them. I even mentioned this the other day. In this April 2019 game, I have it on very good authority. Now, this has now been put out by other bigger media people. Kevin Garnett played in this game, former NBA legend. Notice Kevin Garnett wasn't charged in this case because I'm sure he probably believed he was playing in a legit game. What makes this bad and why Mr. Billups is involved in this indictment through just one game is the fact that he knew the game was being cheated and he acted on it and made money off of it. One person would tell me that in that Las Vegas game, Chauncey, quote, cleaned up. That same source would tell me that they didn't even think Billups knew how to play poker. So again, remember, the main thing we need to see here is Eric Ernest also played Chauncey Billups' pal. Now, in that game, I think this is interesting. One of the defendants, Sophia Wee, expressed concern that Eric Ernest and Chauncey Billups had, quote, one too many improbable hands by, quote, hit 2 gut shots on the river against the same guy, which would arouse suspicions of cheating. We then recommended that they put another member of the team, the, quote, Middle Eastern guy, at the table so that Billups and Ernest could reportedly lose purposely to him to deflect suspicion away from them. Stroud agreed, and we confirmed that they, quote, already knew the signals. At the messages reflect, Stroud noted that one of the victims had, quote, acted like he wanted Chauncey to have his money because he was, quote, starstruck by Billups, a former basketball player. And that was by design, as Stroud recruited former professional athletes, including Billups and Damon Jones, again, through his relationship to Chauncey Billups and Eric Ernest. They would then lure victims to play in the games, and their role as face cards meant that they would get a portion of the proceeds. For instance, including another rig game in late October 2020 in which Billups participated, which I believe was in Las Vegas. It was not listed here. And that bank record showed that Stroud, through his company, Little Robbie Productions, LLC, wired Wee $50,000, who in turn wired that $50,000 directly to Chauncey Billups. Now, in another game in approximately 2024, several of the defendants participated in a rigged game in Miami in which they defrauded John Doe 4 out of $60,000. Now, the defendants in this case, Nelson Alvarez, Jamie Gillette, Tony Goodson, Kenny Hahn, John Mazzola, Michael Renzulli, and Robert Stroud, organized and participated in this rigged game involving John Doe 4 using a rigged shuffling machine. According to what I know, celebrities at that game who were not named in this indictment included boxer Adrian Broner. There's also another NFL star. He no longer plays in the league, but he's a Hall of Famer that was also said to have played at that game. Remember, the Las Vegas and Miami games have nothing to do with the Mafia. There is no mob there. There was no one in there that got money from that game. The only games that involved the Mafia were the New York games. And what's interesting is we also see through these text messages that all the defendants sent signals, and they also knew who would be playing at the games. They also list how to tap, what colors. This is showing us a conspiracy here. And this is what the feds are going to use to get these guys and jam them up. Notice one of the guys wrote, "Guys, please let him win a hand. He's in for 40K. In 40 minutes, he will leave if he gets no traction." One individual, a person in this case called Nelson Alvarez, responded, "Agreed." Well, let's get into some of the New York game stuff, because that's, I think, where a lot of the interest lies in this case due to the mob's involvement, most notably at the 147 Lexington Avenue game. In that game, in approximately June and July of 2023, several of the defendants participated in a rig game at Lexington Avenue in which they defrauded John Doe 1 of $1.8 million. Understand, guys, these are not games you play with your friends for a couple of dollars or cents. There are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on the table in these games. They're playing very large blinds. They're playing PLO, pot limit Omaha, as well as no limit hold'em. There are games where shifts in pots. And remember, too, the mob is going to take a 5% rake on every hand. So if there's a $40,000 hand, they're taking 5% off every hand. What's crazy is they didn't need to rig these games. There's enough money in the rake. And what you're also doing is bringing unwanted attention, as well as people not wanting to play because they find out the game is cheated. Being a cheater is just being greedy. In these games, there was so much money involved, you didn't need to cheat. That's what's crazy about all this. Now, the defendants, Ammar Awadi, John Gallo, Marco Garzon, Kenny Hahn, Zen Yu, John Mazzola, and Seth Trussman, organized and participated in the games involving John Doe 1 by, again, at one point using a rigged shuffling machine provided by Robert Stroud. So, again, that's all very concerning. They don't need to cheat this guy because he's likely going to give him the money anyway. And notice that big name there, Ammar Awadi. Now, in the 2023 Lexington Avenue game, they decide, the mob and some of the game runners, that they want to merge the Lex Avenue and Washington Place game. So instead of having two games, they're going to just have one game. As a result of the merger, according to the indictment, the Bonanno and Gambino families agreed they would each take a percentage of the proceeds of the games, both rigged and non-rigged. For example, in the following text message from defendant Zen Yu using the alias Jonathan Chan to another defendant, Seth Trussman, Zen Yu reported that he had spoken with defendant John Gallo, a Gambino associate, about sending money, and that defendant Julius Ziliani, a Bonanno member, said to send the money to defendant Lee Fama, aka Lee. Chan says, quote, "John called me to shoot the shit. He then asked when I'm sending the money. I told him Jay said send the money to Lee." Now, the message related to the proceeds of the rigged game in June and July of 23 that defrauded John Doe 1 of approximately $1.8 million, which is described in this indictment. So that's a lot of money, a piece that they're getting. Now, defendants Ziliani and Fama, who are both in the Bonanno and Gambino families, would regularly meet at Sally's Bar, which is very close to the Lexington Avenue game, in furtherance of the joint venture to profit from the rigged poker scheme. Here's a photo of Ziliani and Fama hobnobbing and chatting at Sally's Bar on October 4th, 2023. We also have to discuss some of the violence in this case, because as I stated, at one point in 2023, the Lex Avenue game and Washington Place game merge. And in the fall, around that time, Ammar Awadi has a problem. He's disillusioned by these people and says, fuck these guys. I'm going to just start my own game. And guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to do it at the same time, same day of the week, and we're going to run in competition with each other, which was not a good idea for Ammar Awadi. According to this indictment, On the night of October 11, 2023, defendants, mobsters, Thomas Gilardo, Julius Ziliani, and another stormed 80 Washington Place with weapons. Ziliani was armed with a gun. Gilardo was armed with a baton. They entered 80 Washington Place while a poker game was ongoing and assaulted Amar Awadi. A brawl then broke out, and Gilardi and Ziliani left the location. Defendant Gilardi then messaged defendant Zanyu with the demand that they cease contact with Awadi and his partner, saying, quote, "There's to be no more contact with any of them. You hear? Do not reply or answer. Fucking Bruce, John, Amar, tell us all the same. I don't want to hear different." Now, defendant Thomas Gilardo is, from what multiple people would tell me, a major hothead. He was regarded as crazy, a lunatic, a real tough guy. He used steroids at one point, allegedly. He is a tough guy. He is not a mobster currently. He is an associate. I have heard from his behavior in this, he has been chased from working with any family. No family will work with him. I last heard that he was in Florida. Now, he's currently in prison, but he was chased. No family's dealing with him because, from what I understand, he got into some sort of argument after this indictment's alleged with defendant Ziliani, and Ziliani basically chased him. No family will deal with the guy now. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about some of the extortion that went on in this case. Zen Hugh, which is one of the defendants, assaulted one of the players, John Doe 5, for not paying him a gambling debt. Zen Hugh would then send the following threats. "Yeah, you're not going to pay me. All right, bet. Watch what's good now. You've been running your mouth unchecked." He then would confirm that he punched that individual in another conversation with another person, where he would say, quote, "I punched somebody in the face the other day. Shit's unraveling quick." They then went down the road to assault Mr. Awadi. Now, at one point in this whole, sending goons, almost a year later, John Doe 5, who was hit by Zen Yu, sent a message regarding how it's crazy that you're sending people after me, saying, quote, "What you did was, quote, cowardly and ridiculous. And then you sent a bunch of goons to solve your problems," which would ensure that Zen Yu used mobsters to either get his debt paid or he did it himself by punching that individual in the face. Now, one of the big things in this case is this shuffling machine and these shuffling machines that were used. These were obviously tinkered with. You can't find these in stores. You obviously have to find them on the black market. At one point in this indictment, some of the defendants decide that they don't want to pay for anything. They just want to go get a machine themselves. And this was a robbery that they would pursue on September 7th, 2023. Defendants Awadi, Hotai, Mazzola, Minucci, and Stroud learned that John Doe 7, who was involved in the operation, had a rigged version of a Deck Mate 1 shuffler, which I just showed. They then plotted to rob John Doe 7 at gunpoint. In the early morning hours of September 7th, 2023, John Doe 7 was in a car with defendants Hotai and Mazzola when two individuals recruited by Nicholas Minucci, another defendant, approached the car. They would brandish a gun and demand the box from John Doe 7. At the time of the robbery, Hotai, who was driving the car and in on the scheme along with Mazzola, kept the car in park and did not drive away. John Doe 7 then turned over the rigged shuffling machine to Nicholas Minucci and the gunman. Evidence of the robbery included text messages, poll camera footage, and license plate reader information showing that the cars used were both registered to Nicholas Minucci and Mr. Hotai, who participated in the robbery. It's not real smart. For example, on September 6th, the day before, defendant Goodson sent Stroud a photograph of John Doe 7 at the airport, apparently confirming that John Doe 7 had arrived in New York. At approximately 12:31 on September 7th, poll camera footage showed Minucci's car arrive at Lexington Avenue. At the same time, Hotai texted Awadi saying, quote, "Nick is here. Did I let him up?" To which Awadi replied, "Tell him I'm coming down." After the robbery, defendants Hennon and Awadi exchanged the following information about how Awadi was contacted by Hennon saying that he had heard about the robbery of the Deck 1 Mate shuffler. Hennon says to him, "Word on the street is you and Rob are taking DM1s now. Shit is getting real in NYC." To which Awadi responds with a popular GIF describing to hide your wife, hide your kids. Following that robbery, Defendant Stroud texted defendant Minucci to arrange a meeting. I'm about to head down. Are you here? Minucci would respond, trying to call you. So there are not only rigged poker games here, but some of these defendants used extortion, assault, and other things, including robbery, to get what they wanted. Understand and remember, this is only in the New York cases. None of these New York defendants had any involvement from this indictment and according to this indictment in some of the other games. So don't let the media try to tell you that Chauncey Billups knows mobsters. He doesn't. And in fact, as I said under oath, he would admit to that he does not know any mobsters. This is a large operation that goes on all around the country. Some of these people are some of the biggest poker cheats we have in this country. People like Ammar Awadi. You look at someone like Eric Ernest, who introduced his friend to this world. Chauncey Billups made mistakes participating in these poker games. It's pretty simple. That said, in my opinion, he has way bigger problems in the first indictment we talked about. And his involvement with Eric Ernest is going to derail his career and his legacy. I do want to discuss some of the mob defendants, and I want to discuss what people are still in prison. Some of these defendants, including Angelo Ruggiero Jr., the son of one-time Gambino heavyweight Angelo Quack Quack Ruggiero, as well as Thomas Gilardo, Ammar Awadi, Zen Hugh, and Fat Nick Minucci. They are all still being held. The reason for that is a detention memo, which I just talked about, which involves Hobbs Act extortion, Hobbs Act robberies, violence, threats. The federal government believe they are dangerous to the community, and right now they are being held. That's why they're in jail. From what I understand, every other defendant has posted and it is out. So that's all pretty important. Now, one other thing I do want to talk about, defendant Minucci. This is the same Nick Minucci who in 2006 was involved in a national story involving what the government will call a hate crime against a person called Glenn Moore. According to what we know, Minucci beat up Glenn Moore with a baseball bat. I talked about that case here, and I'd urge you to check it out. Nick Minucci got 15 years for that, and sadly hasn't seemed to learn from his prison time because he's still involved with illegal activity. I want to obviously say that all of the individuals in this case are innocent until proven guilty or until they enter a plea. When the feds come for you, generally it's pretty shut and closed. I do think it's important, though, to also talk about just try to get past some of the clickbait stuff with this story. Obviously, I think the mob is, if I'm an older guy, an old timer, I'm pretty pissed off at this because for the mob, like they didn't really even know anyone in the NBA as far as in this or the other indictment. Like there's no known connection there. And look, on this channel, we talk about the mob. If the NBA wasn't involved with this poker game, which again, in New York, they're not, this would be a story that only I'm talking about. Nobody cares about it. You know, the other indictment, and don't let people try to tell you the mob's involved with point spreads. The mob is not capable of doing what some of these sports betting guys did with some of these dudes. And to be fair, the only reason this was done in the first place is just because the people involved in indictment one knew people. Like people like Eric Ernest knew Chauncey Billups. People like De Niro Laster knew Terry Rozier. And my thought is they didn't think they'd get caught, but they did. It's all going to be very interesting to see what happens next. Do I think that there are more people out there that did this sort of thing? I don't know. Maybe. I won't speculate. And if it happens, it happens. But I think once the kind of closeness of the recency of this case dies down, I think the smoke will clear and we will find out that most of the defendants in this case will plead guilty. I'm going to tell you right now, none of the mob guys in this case are real worried about this. Someone like Gilardo, maybe, just because he is involved more in some of the violence here. Ziliani, Fat Nick Minucci, some of those guys, but none of them are going to trial. Most of these people will plead. And like I said, in terms of Billups and Rozier, that other indictment is way worse for them. I hope you enjoyed this video. I don't want to be cocky, but I do consider this my kind of magnum opus show. I spent a lot of time on it. And I just wanted to kind of try to get past all the bullshit, the stuff you're hearing from, the goofy, salacious newspapers and media companies. So let me know what you think of it. If you can, please share this show with people that you think might enjoy it. Retweet it on Twitter, post about it. It really is appreciative to me. As always, I hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time here on The Sit Down.